All right, welcome back to Beat the Count. We are live here at Sweet Science Boxing Gym in Hawthorne, California. I'm Shawn, your host, and with me, as always, is my partner in crime, lead writer for Supreme Boxing, Anthony Stacks Saldana. What's up, Anthony?
Man, what's going on, Shawn? Glad to be here. Another beautiful day in Southern California. Big fight weekend. Lot to talk about.
Was there a big fight this weekend?
Oh, just a little unification bout at the Staples Center that had 16,702 people in it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it was
We got a couple people here.
pretty good-sized crowd.
What's going on? Marco Trejo, Lupe Gutierrez. I saw Aaron Sorio. What's happening, guys? Thanks
What's
for joining
up?
us.
Aaron Sorio.
Yeah, we're about to talk about it.
Yeah, standing 8.
Standing 8, pound for pound.
Pound for pound.
You got all the good names.
Right?
You took all the good Facebook names, bro. Man, Aaron, I'm gonna have to ask Aaron to call in and give me his opinion on who won. You shared a kind of controversial statement on Facebook. We'll get around to it, but I'm interested in everyone's opinions on Shawn Porter and Errol Spence Jr. because it was a close fight. But I got some questions for you, Stacks, because you were in the building yesterday evening, correct?
Correct. I was in the building yesterday for that fight, man. Great fight. I think, honestly, it was probably one of, if not the best welterweight fights I've seen in the last 15 to 20 years.
I was going to ask about this. So your opinion on, and you guys on the chat, let me know what you think. Is this an all-time fight? Are we going to be talking about this one 15 years from now? Will we be talking about Shawn Porter's unification bout with Errol Spence in the same way that we talk about, Sugar Ray Leonard and Hagler or some of these other great fights that we've seen? Was this an all-time great, or was it just good for now?
No, it was an all-time great welterweight clash. I'm not saying an overall boxing, in a boxing match, yes, it was a great boxing match, but as far as the welterweight division goes, it was a great fight. I've seen some better fights in, of course, the heavyweight, some of the lighter divisions, but as far as the welterweight division goes, it was a great fight.
We got Coach Marco Trejo on the line. Coach says it was akin to the all-time greats.
I agree with Marco, man. I think me and him, we share the same thoughts on that fight. And as they say, great minds think alike.
Well, you don't share exactly the same thoughts because as I understand it, and Coach, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe he thinks Shawn Porter won that fight last night.
How? Dude, seriously? Marco, come on now. You really thought Shawn Porter won that fight? If anybody, not just Marco, thought Shawn Porter won that fight last night, you guys are crazy, man. I mean, seriously, he would have won 8 rounds to 4. 8 rounds. Because he got knocked on his ass in the 11th. So it's like, come on, man. How does Porter win that fight? No way did he beat Errol 8 rounds. Come on, guys.
Oh, man. He's calling you out, Coach. But I agree. I actually tend to think that when you look at all of the measurements of the fight, I'm talking about punches landed. I'm talking about efficiency, accuracy, punches landed to the body, jabs landed, power punches landed. Virtually everything favors Errol, not to mention the fact that he scored the only knockdown of the fight and, in my opinion, throughout the fight had the more precise punches between the two. So I have a hard time. I've seen a number of people, this is not an unpopular opinion, I've seen a number of people this morning saying, and last night saying that they feel that Shawn Porter won that fight, which, to your point, means he would have had to have won 8 rounds.
Correct.
8 rounds out of 12. And I don't understand how someone does that whilst losing the battle of virtually every category. The only thing that Shawn Porter really put on display was his will, which we knew was iron. We already knew that. And it was a tremendous performance. It made for a great fight. I don't disagree that it was close, but I think anyone who found 8 rounds in favor of Shawn Porter was probably looking for rounds to give to Shawn Porter. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Question on the altercation. I'll get into that after we talk more about the fight, Aaron, but basically it was an ex-opponent that was up on the 70th floor that kind of got into Dirrel's face, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But yeah, Porter didn't win 8 rounds. Errol doesn't waste punches. It may have looked like Shawn was throwing a lot more. He was being
he was throwing a lot more, but he wasn't landing a lot more.
But he wasn't landing a lot more. He seemed to be the aggressor throughout the fight. And as we talked about before we came on the show, as I was going through the pictures last night, with the program I have the capability to make it almost look like a movie. So as I'm going through the 2,000 plus pictures, you just see a look of confidence in Porter's face throughout the fight. Errol kind of had a look of almost like he was lost in that ring last night. I mean, yes, he came away with the victory, and I'm not taking anything away from Shawn Porter because he fought a hell of a fight, but I don't know if Errol was... I don't know what was wrong because it didn't look like the Errol Spence we're used to seeing. And that could attribute to just the confidence that Porter had coming in, hitting him from the get-go, and taking the fight to him right from the jump. That maybe threw Errol off. I don't know. And like I said, I'm not taking anything away from Shawn because he fought a hell of a fight. But Errol, and I'm not making excuses, but he didn't have that look. He didn't have that killer look in his eyes like Shawn did last night.
Yeah, well, I think he commented on a couple things real quick. Actually, shout out to Paul Benke and shout out to Cynthia Saldana who jumped on. World champion Paul Benke.
Damon Gonzalez, Latin Box. What's going on, Damon?
Gonzalez, shout out. So a couple things. He did address that at the end, and he attributed it, to Shawn Porter's awkward style and the fact that stylistically it's just a difficult matchup to handle if someone's attempting to box from the outside, use a long jab and do things like that. So I think I understand that. It didn't seem to deter Errol Spence's confidence, though. Like, you look at Errol Spence going into the championship rounds, and he's literally singing and dancing as he stands in his corner before he goes out and dominates in round 11. You know what I mean? Applying pressure and putting on good punches and combinations. So
yeah, and I'm not saying it deterred his confidence or his ability, but what I was saying is just the look of, he didn't have that killer look in his eyes like Shawn did last night. I think Shawn may have wanted it more, and it didn't pan out for Shawn. He fought a better fight than I thought he was going to. I figured by the 6th round, Errol would have already broke him down. Started hurting him in that he'd finish him off by 9th, 10th round, where either they're waving off the fight or the ref jumps in to stop it. But that didn't happen,
And I can't put it any better than Paul Benke did here. So I'm going to grab your quote here. World champion Paul Benke. He says, Porter makes a good boxer looks bad. And I agree. Stylistically, that's just that reckless, abandoned style that I talked about last week is very difficult for effective boxers to handle. It's the same reason that if you look at a fight like Floyd Mayweather and Marcos Maidana, the first one, not the second one, he struggled with Marcos Maidana because he very much took the same approach, which is I'm just going to, I'm going to get in there, we're going to mix it up, I'm going to punch you where I can punch you, I'm going to throw shots from angles that shots don't normally come from. I'm going to do a lot of dirty work, and that's not me saying that Shawn Porter's a dirty fighter. He's just staying busy, staying inside, staying active, and really applying a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But everything will tell you that Errol Spence was more effective.
And
everything will tell you that.
And talking about dirty fighters, another thing we had brought up before we came on camera, and it's something that Damon's commenting about, is the low blows. I didn't have the commentary. I didn't hear it, but I seen it. There was, I don't know, maybe the 3rd or the 4th round where Errol had hit him with 3 or 4 low blows in a row, and nothing was called, and Porter went to complain, and Errol popped him when he turned his head to talk to Jack Reese. So I had asked you, did the commentary, were they talking about those low blows?
They talked a lot about the low blows.
So apparently,
it
it was happening. Apparently Spence was, taking the dirty fight to Shawn as well. It wasn't just, what you hear about Shawn using his head and using elbows. It was actually Errol in there throwing a lot of low blows as well.
Couple things real quick. Shout out to Jason Soto for joining. Jason, I think if you have a fight coming up here, let me know the date and the venue, and I'll plug it out on here. So shout out Jason Soto. Ray Rodas of Red Boxing Promotions. You'll actually be able to catch Ray right here next week. So I'll be here with Ray next week. Shout out to Ray and Red Boxing.
All right, Ray, can't wait to get you on the show. Ray, man, you can talk about your upcoming show in Pico Rivera
Sports Arena, October 12th. So the week after the show, he'll have his fight in Pico Rivera.
Yeah, a lot of new things for Red Boxing, so we'll let Ray talk more about that next week.
Pro Spence ref, Pro Spence judges, in my humble opinion, says Dorian Gray. I don't know about Pro Spence judges. I mean, so your opinion then is that Shawn Porter was able to take away 8 rounds in that fight? It takes 8 rounds. 8 rounds is what it takes for Shawn Porter to win. I guess I can kind of understand the draw, but it's difficult when you consider the fact that Errol Spence threw less punches, landed more jabs, landed more power punches, landed significantly more body punches, scored the only knockdown, and then make the case that he won 8 rounds. That's my ask. Make that case.
So, and if it was pro Spence judges, then all 3 of them would have been for Spence, and it wouldn't have been a split decision. So,
yeah, that's true. So one judge did think he won 8 rounds.
Correct.
And Keith Thurman said he won the first 5. Keith Thurman said he won the first 5 rounds going out of that fight. So I guess it's not.
I think Keith got hit by Pacquiao a little bit too hard, man. Maybe he's still recovering.
He's recovering. He's recovering from a hand injury. He's got to take another year off.
Another year.
Do you believe that? How unfortunate.
Yeah, I told you, man.
The once unified welterweight world champion, he can't get in this mix right now.
I think, like I told you, I think he peaked back in the days. I think he's done. After that shoulder surgery, I think we've seen the best of Keith. And now with this hand injury, I don't see him battling these top guys any longer. I just don't. It's going to be tough for him to get back in the mix with some of these guys like Terrence and like, Errol. So,
couple things real quick. Marco Trejo agrees with you. He said Thurman is done. He also said 116, 111. Come on, man. I didn't say I agree with 116, 111. I said if you think Porter won the fight, then those are all the cases that you have to make. You have to show that Porter won 8 rounds in a fight where he lost in virtually every category over the course of the fight and was knocked down.
Yeah,
right. So you have to be able to prove that he won 8 rounds.
I had a 7-5, 15-13, but then you take the point away and make it 15-12.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's what I had it.
Damon Gonzalez, I believe the knockdown would definitely help Spence seal it because it was razor close. It was a very close fight.
It was.
I don't want to imply that it wasn't close. It was a blowout.
Yeah, I wasn't actually ringside. I was in the building. I was I'd say right at the beginning of the lower level, right above the floor, which was actually a better seat, so I had a better view of the fight, and it was really hard to tell who was winning. Just watching it live without the commentary in my ear, it was a tough fight to judge. I was like, because some of those punches that Porter was landing, they seemed to really be hurting Errol.
No more than the punches that Errol landed were hurting Porter.
Yeah,
no more.
Exactly, but
I'm not saying they didn't hurt. I'm saying they didn't do any more damage than the punches that Errol were landing on Shawn.
Yeah, but again, it was it was hard to judge because they were both hitting each other very, very hard. So, it was very tough.
I think I agree with that. Now, I'm curious because I am, of the people who are on this chat, Paul Benke, I know that you were at the fight last night. Marco Trejo, I know you guys were at the fight. So a lot of you guys were at the venue, and I watched it on TV. So my perspective may just be a little bit different than yours. But because you were in the venue, I'm curious about the crowd. Maybe you guys can share this with me. But how much of the crowd was pro Porter versus pro Errol? Like, what was your sense in terms of who was the crowd behind in that fight?
I'd say it was walking out 90% Errol, 10% Porter, right? By the 6th round, you had a 50-50 crowd with a chance of Porter throughout that building. Like, they wanted to see the upset, It
was like watching Rocky IV, where
yeah,
it was a pro Drago crowd, and halfway through they were rooting for Rocky.
For Rocky, exactly. And so it was the same thing last night. I mean, like I said, they showed us Porter on the screen before the fight back in the locker room. He gets a handful of claps. They go to Spence, and the Staples Center just erupts, right? Same thing during the walkout, but then halfway through the fight, Shawn's hitting Errol with some good shots, man, and then you hear the chants, Porter, and I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. Here, they started rooting for Porter, unless that little 10% just got hella loud all of a sudden, But no, it just seems like the crowd kind of turned in favor of Porter.
Yeah, that's a number of people agreeing with you. Marco said it was 80% Spence, but it was like Rocky IV. See, Coach knows exactly what I'm talking about on that one.
The Russians started cheering.
Yeah, the Russians started cheering for Rocky.
And they were booing when Barrios got the win.
Oh, man. Paul Benke said they were screaming Porter, and it was surprising. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that Errol is the bigger of the two draws, having had the battle with Mikey Garcia. A number of people in the local area here will have watched that. It was a successful pay-per-view event. I think it had over 300,000 purchases. So Errol's kind of a bigger deal now than he was last year.
Seemed like there was a lot of people in from Texas as well. It seems like a lot of Texas fans were in the building. Good crowd. When we had got there, jumped on the StubHub to buy a ticket, and there was plenty of seats available. I'd say 2 hours later, 3 hours later, by 4 o'clock, I got there about 1, bought a ticket, paid $51 for a pretty good seat on StubHub. By 4 o'clock, there was only 4 tickets left on StubHub, and they were going for $600 a pop. So,
wow.
Yeah, it ended up being a sellout. So, good crowd.
So, another thing that I thought that this was a great card. In general, not just this fight, and perhaps all the fights didn't live up to their full potential, but I thought that it was a great card to be made.
You know, it was a great card. I'm glad that they had it in Los Angeles, and thank you to the LA boxing fans. Thank you to all the boxing fans that showed up to support, because the last 2 big PBC fights here have been sellouts. The Wilder Fury, and now this Porter Spence card have sold out the Staples Center, and that just shows how much of a boxing community Los Angeles really is. Yes, we're the hub. Yes, we have a lot of gyms. Yes, there's a lot of fighters out of Los Angeles, but I've been to some fights at the StubHub Center where it's empty. You know, I mean, there's a couple thousand people in there. So for them to put on a good show and to sell out here in California, it really looks good, because even in Vegas, man, I've gone to big fights in Vegas that couldn't sell out the T-Mobile Arena, including some of Canelo's fights. You know, I remember they even had a Canelo fight at the Mandalay Bay when he fought Cotto, and that didn't sell out. You know, the Ward Kovalev fight didn't sell out. So for PBC to be putting on these shows in LA and having them sell out, it really looks good on the LA market, and it's going to continue to bring those big fights back.
Damon Gonzalez said Staples Center drew 16,702 last night. Not too shabby at all. And you actually mentioned one of the undercards that we're going to get to here. He said, with respect to young warrior Mario Barrios, it was not an effective performance at all. So this is one of the things that I've heard a few times recently over the last, since the fight yesterday evening, I should say, which is that Mario Barrios was given a gift. What is your opinion?
I don't believe he was given a gift.
Okay.
And I think he ended up with a broken face. Literally, I think he has some type of broken orbital bone. His face reminded me of the cat that fought Resto. I forget his name, but there's a picture of the guy that fought Luis Resto.
Yeah.
And his face is just swollen, right? And that's what Mario Barrios looked like last night. You can tell there has to be some type of orbital fractures in that face of his. But with the 2 knockdowns, and again, I think he did enough to win a few rounds, but those 2 knockdown rounds helped him pull it off. Tough fight for the kid. That Russian guy doesn't have anything to hang his head on, you know, to have actually hang his head down. He needs to keep his head up, because he fought a hell of a fight, and he'll be back in there, you know, competing with some of the best out there. But at 140, I don't see Barrios hanging in there with somebody like a Ramirez or somebody like a Regis or even a Josh Taylor. You know, he has a belt now. I guess he's the regular champion, because Regis is the super champion. So I don't know.
Couple things real quick. If I didn't say it already, heavyweight Jason Soto, who is on, he'll be fighting October 19th in Bakersfield. Thanks, Jason, for sharing the date. Melody Doria is watching. Shout out to Melody, who's with Red Boxing Promotions, and Jeffrey Harrison. Shout out.
Thank you
as well. Thank
Jeffrey
you
Harrison, Billy Collins Jr. Thank you. Yeah, so if you take a look, you can Google Billy Collins. Look at that face after the Resto fight.
After he fought Louis Risto?
Yeah, and then you look at Mario Barrios' face last night. That's the first thing that came to my head.
Yeah, I will say that I think robbery is difficult when he scored the 2 knockdowns and he had a lot of success early, right? I think we can agree he was successful early in that fight. He scored 2 knockdowns. Mathematically, it starts to be really difficult for someone to overturn that, despite the fact that they've done a lot of damage, obviously, as you're saying, to his face. and that they're clearly winning rounds, and you could see that they're winning rounds in succession, banking a lot of things in a row. It's just that, when you put those early rounds in the bank for Barrios, including 2 knockdowns, all of a sudden it has to be pretty lopsided for the rest of the fight in order to pick up a victory in that way.
And that's with any close rounds. If any close rounds go to Barrios, that's what's going to happen. He's going to pull off the victory the way he did last night.
Yeah.
So you have to, you can't guess that, hey, this kid's going to win and he's going to look good. He's going to get dropped twice. So I don't see these guys going back and, well, you know what, let me just change round 1 because this guy deserves to win. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. And the other thing is in some situations, particularly in situations where knockdowns are making the difference in the fight, 2 knockdowns are making the difference in the fight, the fighter has to own that to a certain extent. Like, if you don't want that outcome, then don't go down, right? So I think, and I understand that sounds a little bit harsh, but not that I agree necessarily with the judging, but if you're going to get knocked down twice, you're going to be in a hole, particularly if you lose early rounds. Yeah, particularly if you're losing early rounds aside from the knockdown. And we can't really look at the judges and blame them. The fighter has to assume some of that responsibility, do they not?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Who's the super duper champion?
Yeah, Marco Trejo says, who's the super duper champion? They haven't released that one yet. That'll come out, I think, next year.
Yeah.
Super duper.
Super duper.
Next year, the WBC super duper champion.
Yeah. Another fight we had on there, kicked off the pay-per-view card. A couple of local Southern California favorites, man. We had the Riverside Rocky Josecito Lopez going up against John Molina, and it was funny, man. I had stepped away to grab something to eat, man, and they had the TV screens on, and I was talking to somebody in line, and he says, "What do you think?" I said, "John look old. He looks old. Josecito looked good against Keith Thurman. I don't think this is going to be the war that everybody thinks it's going to be." And the bell rang, and the first or the second punch, down went Molina, and it was a tough fight for Molina, and
but I will say that he's still every ounce of John that we're accustomed to seeing. Maybe not athletically in the sense that, he's now at 147. He's taking punishment. You could make an argument. I'm sure a lot of people are going to say after that performance that he should retire, but there's so much heart and fire in that dude, man. That even in a fight where he goes down twice early on, he's able to make it interesting. And you could see that Josecito Lopez has a lot of respect for him. You could hear when they go to Robert Garcia in the corner and he says, hey, we have to be careful at every moment in this fight because he's still dangerous. He's still got fire in those hands. That everybody just has a lot of respect for what he's doing. It was not as entertaining as I had expected it to be because it was one-sided. But I will say that both guys... Tremendous heart. They're fun to watch.
Not just tremendous heart, but both guys they're classy individuals, man. These guys in the community, both John and Josecito, man, they're classy guys. They're the type of boxers that if you run into them, they don't care if there's 100 fans and they have a meeting to go to. They're going to stop and take a picture with every single one of those fans. Both John, both Josecito, they embrace the fans. They embrace Southern California. They're homegrown. They stick to their roots. They love fighting out here. They had massive respect for each other. There wasn't a lot of shit talking going on between them. There wasn't a lot of
former sparring partners.
Yeah.
In fact.
So, it was an entertaining fight. I thought it was going to be a little bit more action. I thought it was going to be a little bit more entertaining, but it was still a good fight to put on that card. And then you get to the co-main event, which was David Benavidez.
David Benavidez.
Anthony Dirrel.
Anthony Dirrel for the WBC 168-pound title. David, of course, lost his as the result of a positive drug test. He never lost his title in the ring.
Correct.
Looking to reclaim it last night, and he did in pretty dramatic fashion.
Yeah, he did. And so, Texas fans.
I knew this was coming.
Texas Athletic Commission.
The cut. Michael Dutchover's cut coming up.
Michael Dutchover, if you're listening, people watching in, you guys take a lesson to what the California State Athletic Commission did last night when they looked at that cut. They wiped that cut. They asked Dirrel if he was okay. The doctor allowed him to fight and continue to fight. It wasn't a damn scratch that got called before the doctor even got to the ring and said this fight's done. So please, Texas Commission, take a look at last night's fight. Watch how a real athletic commission handles business and take some damn lessons, please. Because you guys cost an undefeated fighter his first loss.
Hey, no joke, though. They probably should have stopped that fight. That cut was gnarly.
Oh, yeah, it was
night.
bad, man.
His eyelid looked like it was about to fall off. The referee literally brought him over to the corner like 4 different times inside of 2 minutes because he... It's like, are you sure you don't want to...
I looked up at the screen, right, in between rounds, and it's like when they went to rub the Vaseline across it, he rubbed his finger across and it like opened up even more. And I honestly thought like his eyelid was gonna fall off.
It looked like it. It looked like it was going to.
Bad.
And the referee gave him a lot of opportunities. I think one thing I talked about in regards to the cut, that you're referring to with Michael Dutch over, and also Tyson Fury's cut, is the way that they react in the corner when speaking with the doctor and speaking with the corner man. In Tyson Fury's case, I said he rushed the doctor. He told him, "I can see. Let's go. Let's get this over with. I can fight." Right? And that's how he reacted. The same thing happened with Anthony Dirrel last night. They brought Anthony Dirrel over there and they said, "Do you want to fight?" And he said, "Hell yeah, I want to fight. Let's go. Let's get this done." Even though he clearly was impaired by it. And it was a really bad cut. In a way, he convinced them to let him continue, perhaps when they shouldn't have. And he took a little bit of punishment, I think, for moving on in that fight beyond that round. Because you could see, once he became impaired, David was really able to put it on him in the following rounds, 2 rounds, and ultimately got the stoppage.
I think that stoppage is what a lot of people thought was going to happen. I think for the most part, a lot of people knew that David was going to win this fight. I personally think that David took way too many hits, and styles make fights. So with that being said, if they have that unification matchup with Caleb Plant, Caleb's a completely different fighter than Dirrel. He's a boxer. He's a flashy defensive type fighter, and I think he can give, Benavidez a lot of trouble in that ring. I was one of the only ones that picked Plant to beat Uzcategui, and because of that reason, he's a defensive fighter. He's not gonna make a war out of a fight with Benavidez. He's smarter than that. He's gonna use his boxing skills, and Benavidez is gonna have to come in not so flat-footed, and he's gonna have to use that reach and actually box with Caleb. So if that fight does happen, I think that's gonna be a real damn good fight.
I would say Caleb has a tendency to tire a little bit, though. He gets a little, you know what I mean? David still looked strong towards the end of that fight last night, and Anthony Dirrel, despite the impairment, was still giving it his effort, particularly against Uzcategui. Caleb Plant, by the end of that fight, had let Uzcategui back into the fight because he was tired.
Yeah, and the thing about that though is, I don't know. The thing about that is that he looked good. David looked good. He wasn't tired. Caleb's not going to knock David out.
And it's not like he got marked up. Like you say, He took a lot of shots, but David fully
he wasn't marked up.
He wasn't ever in danger, really. In that fight.
Exactly. And I don't see Caleb hurting David, but that's why I said Caleb's going to have to box beautifully. He'll have to use his defensive skills and box it. I don't know. It could be though like a Hagler-Hearns type fight, where you just have Hearns looking good in boxing, where you have Caleb looking good in boxing the first few rounds and then just gets caught.
Did you see last week? I'll give you one more, Damon Gonzalez. Here we go. Oh, sorry, I forgot to unmute it.
Woo! Woo!
You can blow the speakers out, brother. Oh, man. But I don't know if you saw last week, they had all of the PBC super middleweights talking about each other. And they were talking about David Benavidez, and he was talking about Caleb Plant, and then they would cut to Caleb Plant, and he's talking about David, and then Anthony Dirrel, and they're going back and forth. Obviously, they're talking about Caleb Smith as someone who's at the top of the division, but he's not part of the segment by virtue of the fact that he's not promoted by PBC, right? One thing I thought was interesting is they left Billy Joe Saunders completely out. They don't mention him as someone at the top. They don't mention him as a potential opponent for anyone. He's just isolated. Billy Joe is left out of the conversation entirely.
And he's a very dangerous opponent for any contender, any world champion at 168 right now. Billy Joe, he's, to me, basically a lighter Tyson Fury, with those boxing skills that he has, that style of fighting that he uses, so he's also a force to be reckoned with. You know,
I think it's funny that PBC has just made the decision not to recognize those champions. Like, they don't recognize Terrence Crawford as a welterweight world champion. They do not recognize any title from that organization, is my understanding. So they don't recognize Billy Joe Saunders as a champion, and therefore he's not even included, despite the fact that he doesn't have a title.
Yeah. We'll see. Let's see. Sparring partners will help David.
Coach does not have a high opinion of Billy Joe Saunders based on his last comment. You guys can read it. Rashawn Jones says, why? Why what? Why does PBC not recognize what is it, the WBO, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know.
Terrence Crawford, for one, probably.
It's funny too, because it seems like most of the WBO champs are from Top Rank, you know, so.
Well, yeah, I think that's the idea, is that it's the, what do they call it? The World Bob Organization or something.
World Bob Organization.
Something like that.
Yeah,
I've they're closely affiliated with Top Rank, and therefore they decide not to recognize it. I don't know what reason they gave. I really don't. They just don't. You'll notice when they put up the graphics of all welterweight champions, Terrence Crawford is not included. When they put up graphics of super middleweight champions, Billy Joe Saunders is not included. He does not count. They'll even put Canelo in there sometimes, and he has a regular belt. But
yeah, I don't know. The other thing we had going on though,
Wee Bob org. Thank you, Jeffrey Harrison. Yeah, Wee Bob org.
The other thing we had going on yesterday at the Staples Center is they had the announcement for the November 23rd
November 23rd.
The rematch of Deontay Wilder, the WBC heavyweight champion, and Luis Ortiz.
I missed an opportunity there. I needed to have the sound clip from Friday when Debo was, it's the rematch. You know what I'm talking about? That's right. What I needed. Oh, man. I'll get that one for next time.
That's right. No, and, we sat there and waited and waited. And waited. It was supposed to be a 2 p.m.
You're still bitter about this?
2 p.m. press conference.
He's a heavyweight world champion. He shows up when he wants.
Yeah.
he doesn't cater to
people from PBC get a call at 2:15 and says, Deontay just left Glendale. It's raining and there's traffic, but he'll be here in 15 minutes. Yeah. We waited till almost 4 o'clock for Deontay Wilder to show up yesterday. So I was just hanging out outside yelling at the fans. I went out to the balcony and yelled at the fans, and that's why I saw Paul Behnke.
Yeah, Paul Behnke shot a video of you up on the balcony.
Yeah, I figured go out there and have some fun, you know. No, but they announced that rematch. It'll be at the MGM Grand Garden Arena November 23rd with Leo Santa Cruz taking on Miguel Flores for the title that Davis just relinquished. So you have that as the co-main event. You have Leo Santa Cruz moving up from featherweight to super featherweight. What are we looking at here?
Sorry, I was just reading a comment from Damon Gonzalez.
It was a huge fight. The IBF president, Daryl Peoples, wasn't in the ring for his belt.
That's a good point. He wasn't in the ring for his belt. You know something else that happened afterwards that I thought was peculiar, besides that, is they clearly told Errol that his next opponent was Danny Garcia, and this was the first that he had heard of it. They told him live on the air, we're going to announce formally, this is your next opponent, Danny Garcia, right? And his reaction tells me that he wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Don't you feel like you should tell a fighter about that before you go on and well, I mean, I guess it's the winner, so they don't know that it's going to be Errol, but I feel like that's not the way that a fighter should find out who their next pay-per-view opponent is.
Exactly.
And he already had said that he wanted an opportunity to fight with Manny Pacquiao. He would prefer a Manny Pacquiao fight than a Danny Garcia fight.
Yeah, this I don't know. Honestly, I think Errol deserves just a defense where he can choose his own dance partner, his own opponent. You know, I don't think
how much of that is sticking it to Bud Crawford.
Right.
Where you go, we're not even considering Bud. Danny Garcia is your next opponent, but
right.
That's a shot at Top Rank, right?
Exactly.
That's what that is.
Soria, when's your birthday, man? November 23rd. You said that's your birthday present. When's your birthday, Soria?
You're going to the fights on November 23rd? Right on, man. Mikey and Pac-Man may fight then. Yeah, I agree, because they had floated those two, Mikey Garcia and Danny Garcia, as the potential opponents for Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah.
And now that they've announced officially Danny Garcia will be fighting Errol Spence.
Now, here's the thing with Mikey and Pacquiao. I've talked to Mikey a few times. Most recently, I'd say 2 weeks ago. I talked to him.
Recent update
On Mikey, because as you guys know, for people that have been following Supreme Boxing, that have been following me in my career, I think it was 2 years ago when Mikey broke the news that he was going to be fighting Errol Spence, or had actually called out Errol Spence. Fight happened. Talked to him the night before the Fury fight in Vegas, and he doesn't seem like he really wants to fight Pacquiao this next fight. Basically, what he told me is he'd like to maybe take another opponent at 147 to see if he's worthy to fight Pacquiao. And those were his words. So, I mean, he's coming off that loss. He hasn't fought since he's fought Errol Spence. I don't know if he wants to jump in the ring with Pacquiao, and I don't know what Mikey wants to do right now. I don't know if he wants to go back to 140. I don't think he knows what he wants to do. You know, I mean, he's got a lot of decisions he needs to make, whether he's going to stick around at the welterweight division and fight with these guys or drop back down to, 140.
I can completely understand wanting to not take a difficult opponent after a loss like you've experienced with Errol Spence Jr. But I do also want to comment on this comment from Jeffrey Harrison. He says he feels bad for Bud. He's the odd man out, and he needs PBC guys to cement his legacy at welterweight. And I actually think that's one of the reasons when I asked at the beginning, was this an all-time great fight? I tend to think that it may not be. So when we look at it 10 years from now, this may be the era where we look at it and we go, we never really got to understand who was the best. You know what I mean? Like, it won't necessarily be remembered for this fight so much as it'll be remembered, but like, yeah, but he never fought Bud Crawford, and we never we never really got to. We don't know that he was actually the best, even though he unified and all this kind of stuff. Even if he goes on and beats Danny Garcia, and I think that there's this air of doubt that is going to live as a shadow or a cloud over this era for a long time. And 10 years from now, we'll go, yeah, none of those guys would have beat Floyd though. You know, or the other thing that doesn't help it is the fact that Keith Thurman lost to Manny, right? Who at 40 years old. So there's like a direct comparison of the previous generation, right? Like, that's supposed to be a passing of the torch moment, only it wasn't. He kept the torch, right?
So you're looking at this, right? And so I get what you're saying is that if Keith Thurman is losing to Manny, right? How much more clout does that fucking give to Floyd Mayweather, who took apart?
It's not just that. It's every welterweight of the previous generation.
Every welterweight.
It's all the people who battled against all the Juan Manuel Marquez.
How good was Marquez?
All those guys.
Exactly. How good were these guys?
Because we look at it now, and there are these things that keep happening that are really going to make this welterweight class, I think, when we look back on it in history, and we're going to go, oh, there's a lot of doubts about those guys. I mean, the guy who was the unified world champion lost to Manny Pacquiao in what was supposed to be a torch-passing fight. None of them ever fought Bud Crawford, right? So, like, there's too much doubt, I think. Yeah. I don't think it will be looked upon favorably.
Yeah, people will always look back. People that follow boxing, people that have been fans for a long time will always look back to the four kings and say, look, man, it wasn't Leonard or Duran or Hearns. You know, I mean,
it wasn't everybody fighting everybody.
Yeah, it wasn't everybody fighting everybody.
Damon Gonzalez says PBC and Top Rank are scheduled to work together in February, ESPN and Fox for Wilder Fury 2. And if that all works out, we will see Bud in the mix. I hope so. Although Wilder has a decent-sized test in front of him. I don't think the Luis Ortiz match was easy the first time around. I don't expect it'll be easy this time around. And there's also the matter of the cut healing for Tyson Fury and whether or not February is an appropriate time frame for that fight. Good comment, though.
And it looks like, we have other people, besides Aaron, Damon, another cat named Courtney. They're all talking about the same thing. Basically, it's time for Top Rank and PBC to get together and make this fight happen.
At a certain point, there's too much money to be left on the table for some of these fights to not proceed.
And it can't marinate like Floyd and Manny did, man. It can't, bro.
You say that, okay? So everyone's very critical of that, but you have to remember that it's, the most purchased pay-per-view of all time. So, like, you could say it can't marinate that long. From a fan standpoint, we don't appreciate it as much, but it made more money than it ever would have made. So, like, if it happened 5 years earlier, do you think the pay-per-view would have made more money? They marinated the appropriate amount of time for their business. They just didn't marinate the approach. It was not good for us.
Here's the thing. Even 5 years earlier, I think it would have sold $4.5 million, if not even more then, because it's the names, Manny Pacquiao and Floyd. If you look back, going back to 1999, right? Three fighters have only sold 1 million pay-per-views. That's it.
Tyson?
No. De La Hoya,
Mayweather,
and Pacquiao. That's it.
Okay.
That's it. Nobody else has sold 1 million pay-per-views. If you say Canelo, yeah, but who was he fighting? Mayweather. So.
Well, Canelo's pay-per-view, or the fight with Triple G, was 1.4 million, right?
Was it?
Yeah, I think the Canelo Triple G fight, the second one was 1.4 million. So
Canelo, there's a new one to add to the list. Then
Canelo had 1 million plus. In his
like you just, with the streaming services now, with the way people can bootleg and just watch it, the pay-per-view sales are gonna drop. It's not gonna be like before. You had to order the pay-per-view, or you had like one of those black boxes. I don't remember if you remember those black boxes, those illegal cable things, or you could watch that.
I don't know what you're talking about. No.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't like now where everybody's got Fire Sticks and this and that, and let's just illegally stream things, So. Yeah,
well, it also wasn't $75. My goodness, what is going on with these pay-per-views?
Right, $100 if you want HD. What is it, $89.99 and $99.99 for HD?
The Triple G noise seems like it has dimmed a bit, says Damon Gonzalez. Well,
that's right. He fights this weekend, doesn't he?
Yeah, he fights Derevyanchenko.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It doesn't even seem like a Triple G fight week. It's even they had a presser out here on Tuesday, and it was to invited media only, and it was a little small, I guess, breakfast at some motel in Santa Monica or some restaurant in Santa Monica. I'm not sure, but it doesn't feel like a Triple G fight week. And this is for a world title,
Yeah.
So
the world title vacated by Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah.
But Canelo doesn't seem to want any of promoting Triple G anymore.
None.
He doesn't want none.
No.
Doesn't want, and I don't know that it has anything to do with the fight so much as it has to do with an amount of bad blood between the two.
That's exactly what it is, man. I'm a big Triple G fan. I've never really been a Canelo fan, right? But for people to go out there and make excuses and say that Canelo's scared of Triple G, that's absolutely nonsense. That's bullshit, man. He's not scared of this man, or else he would have never gotten in the ring with him twice, okay? So for people that are saying that he's scared of Triple G, that's nonsense. It's business, man. He just doesn't want to give Triple G another big payday. And I can understand. Canelo is clearly now the A-side to anybody he fights. Anybody. Even if it's a rematch with Triple G. Will it sell? Yeah, of course it's going to sell.
Except Floyd. Floyd would be the A-side of that.
Yeah, except Floyd. You're right. But
Floyd
you know,
come
man,
out of retirement.
like I said, I'm a G fan, but it's just he's pretty much done, man. I mean, as far as the limelight, as far as him being a superstar, I think it peaked right before he fought Canelo the first time, signing with Apple, signing with Nike, having all these big endorsements. He's done. He's peaked. His superstardom, like you said, the star is starting to burn out, and he's slowly going to drift away into retirement, and it happens, and that's okay.
Very grim outlook on Triple G's career here.
I'm just saying, man. I'm being real, man.
He might be a world champion by the end of next week.
Yeah, but really, I mean, yeah. Like I said, a few fights left, and that's it for
you
G.
favor him over Derevyanchenko, right?
I do. I think it's going to be a tough fight, and I think he's gonna. I think he may end up getting. I'm not gonna say hurt, but he may get hurt during that fight. Not like long-term hurt or anything, but like I think Derevyanchenko has the ability to wobble him, maybe even drop him, but.
Yeah, Rashawn Jones says once he wins again, he will be back, and I think particularly if he picks up a belt in this fight, there's some opportunities for him. Even if Canelo's not out there, there are other fights on DAZN he could make. You could fight Billy Joe Saunders and win a belt in another weight class potentially, or you could fight Boo Boo Andrade. Yeah,
and I'm not saying
there's a lot of fights there for him.
He does have that contract with DAZN, so we are gonna hear more of him, of course. But what I'm saying is he's peaked. He's done. His superstardom has peaked. He's not going to be that same boogeyman that he was before he fought Canelo. that Mexican power or, Mexican style Triple G.
Big drama show.
Big drama show. Everybody wants to, jump in on the Triple G bandwagon. That's not there anymore. It's just not.
Oh, man. So that's it. That's the recap.
That's the recap, man.
That is the recap.
So Shawn.
Yes, sir.
Is going to be announcing something today. So he's got a big announcement coming up.
You are playing this up a little bit too much.
I'm going to just say it right now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be our very, very last Beat the Count podcast. But don't cry. Don't be sad about it, because it's going to be okay.
I'll still be here next week.
I'll be here next week, but we will no longer be Beat the Count. Shawn, why don't you go ahead and explain to the fans what's going on?
Yeah, well, what I'll say is that I'm in the process now of creating a nonprofit organization that's going to help the sport of boxing. It's called the Just Boxing Foundation, and part of that will be this show. So this show will be a product of Just Boxing, which you can see I do right now, wearing on my shirt every time I'm here. And so the show will be Just Boxing Live going forward.
With that being said, there are plans for Shawn and I to make this Just Boxing thing a very big part of the boxing community. Besides the Just Boxing Live podcast, he will have the organization, the nonprofit organization, the Just Boxing nonprofit organization, which will help boxers. Slowly but surely, we will start becoming a media outlet as well, the Just Boxing media outlet. These are all plans that we have to make this Just Boxing product grow in the Southern California community. With the help of you guys, with our fans that have watched us, with the help of the fighters that have been here, with the help of the promoters, with the other people of the boxing community that have been here, we thank you guys. We want your continued support, because this is going to grow. Shawn and I have a good thing going on here, and I see nothing but a bright future for Shawn and I and the Just Boxing Live, the Just Boxing Foundation, the Just Boxing Media.
So to be clear, the formation of the nonprofit takes a period of time. I expect that it will take at least 4.5 to 5 months, and that we won't be an official nonprofit recognized with the trademarks and the tax-exempt status and all those different things for, until sometime early in 2020. We're going to rebrand the show ahead of that, Just Boxing Live.
Just Boxing Live.
But that whole process has been started, and we're driving it through to completion right now.
So people in the boxing community, people like Damon Gonzalez, other media outlets, people that have been around longer than Shawn and I, inbox us. A lot of you guys have my number. Contact us. I can get you in contact with Shawn. Help us make this thing the best we possibly can. Like I said, we want to make this grow. We have the help of several people in the boxing community right now. And like I said, eventually we'll get this platform to where we want it to be. We're taking baby steps. There's going to be bumps along the way, but we'll get through this, And like I said, it's going to start next week with the Just Boxing Live program. Our first guest will be Ray from Red Boxing. So
Bernie Valenzuela says, how can we help? That's a good question, Bernie. Right now, we're still going through the process of forming the Just Boxing Foundation and the nonprofit organization. That'll take several months, but ultimately there will be a lot of different types of projects that we look to do. So just to give you an idea, well, for one thing, what I'll say is that forming any nonprofit organization the right way requires that you establish a board of directors as part of forming the organization. And so it's not just how we decide to utilize money or donations or charitable causes. Those things get put to a vote in front of a board, and the board decides what's in the best interest. And the board has to operate according to guidelines and according to, various bylaws and things like that are in place. So we're taking all the steps to make sure that we can do everything correctly. And the reason I say that is because I have a lot of ideas of how we can make a difference in the boxing community and in the sport of boxing. But it's not just my ideas. It has to be run through other people and governed and made sure that everything's in accordance to the letter of the law. So I'm not asking for donations or anything like that just yet. And ultimately, We'll probably offer some gear, some apparel, things like these shirts and stuff like that that will help fund the Just Boxing Foundation. I can give you an idea of how I think some situations where I think it would be appropriate for the Just Boxing Foundation to donate kind of funds or time or effort. So anything in terms of the mission statement for the Just Boxing Foundation is to empower or support the past and empower the future generation of boxing, right? So that's what we want to do. We want to, firstly, at the low end, help young amateur boxers compete internationally. We want to help the victims of tragedy in the sport of boxing. So very recently, you could think of situations like Isaac Kalunga or Maxim Dadashev or Hugo Santillan, things like that, where we would want to provide support or aid in ways that we can. And over time, when we comes to thinking big, there are different things that we can do in the community. One thing that LA is big on is creating fitness zones in public parks. There are a lot of parks that don't have fitness zones. I would actually like to try to work with the community to create fitness zones that are essentially outdoor boxing communities or outdoor boxing gyms. And what that will do is it will enable schools as well as parks and recreation departments to create boxing programs in their community without having to go through the red tape of finding a place to do it. And so those are just some examples from small to big. There's a lot of different ideas. Again, all of these things would need to be vetted and approved by a board before any action would be taken, and that's what we're going through the process of creating now.
And a little bit about this whole thing. The ball's rolling. As far as helping these individuals, there's already been donations to some of these families that have had tragedies. There's already been donations made to some of these fighters that are going to be competing at the Olympic trials as well. So the ball's already rolling on the Just Boxing part. And like I said, it's baby steps. We will get there. And it starts next week with the Just Boxing Live program. Yeah. Just Boxing Live podcast. Yeah.
To your point, I have personally made donations under the name of Just Boxing on a number of these things. I won't go too much into detail about any of them. So this concept is something that existed with me for a long time, and I would just like to make it official. I want to help.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. We are now the Just Boxing podcast, and this is now official. Beat the Count has now been retired. Congratulations.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Just Boxing Live.
Just Boxing Live.
I appreciate you guys. That's actually... Do you got anything else for today?
No, I think that's gonna wrap it up, man. It was a good program, good weekend of fights. Don't forget, next week you have Clarissa Shields fighting in Detroit. And on that card, we have a former guest, Southern California's own Erin Tohill, will be in action against Hannah Rankin. So good luck to Erin. She's going to be fighting next week in Detroit. Good luck to her. You got the Triple G fight next week. Next Sunday with us, we have Ray Rodas?
Ray Rodas. Boxing Promotions, and he'll have a couple special guests with him as well.
So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Yep.
Peace.